Now, I know in the previous episode I said that this was going to be episode 3 with the brakes, but that's not the way it turned out because I had run out of memory in the camera and I swapped out the card, and then I found the card that had the previously recorded stuff in it. So this episode's going to be what was on that card in order to maintain the chronological order of things. And at the same time here, I'd like to address an issue of people thinking that I don't like four-doors, and everything I own is a four-door. If I could have a four-door truck, I would have one. No, I don't have any problem with four doors, but the whole thing is purely economical. I have a truck that gets 7 miles to the gallon. I had to drive it 150 miles to get to where I had to go. And the reason I went there, I didn't even know this car was there. I went there to go get another truck, which I got. So when I opened up the hood on this and saw the 396, well, that made this a viable car to take a 7 mile to the gallon truck, 150 miles down south, load it up in this car and drive it 150 miles back in a 7 mile a gallon truck, which happens to be a 1969 GMC 3/4 ton 4x4 with 456 gears. But anyway, from the purely economic standpoint of it, if this had been a 6-cylinder or a small block, would it have been worthwhile for me to drive all that distance and spend the day doing that? And the answer is no, because you can't get the same kind of money out of a four-door as you can a two-door. That's just plain fact. Now, the fact that it had a 396 in it, the 396 alone made the trip viable. However, as you may be able to tell right now, some of you kind of jumped the gun on what's going to happen to this car. And in order to find out what happens, you're just going to have to keep watching. I can't stand it. I gotta do it. Well, when I first got this thing running, I was able to stomp the throttle wide open and it would rev up and secondary air valves would open. But once I drove it up to the house, you put your foot into it and it would just quit as soon as the secondaries opened up. When I took the air cleaner off, I found that the air valves were open this far. So as soon as you open the throttle, the air rushes through there because air is lighter than fuel. So the air can move, but the fuel can't, these are actually choke plates, the secondary air valves. And what they do is when you stomp the throttle plate open, it allows manifold vacuum to go all the way to the top of this venturi and start pulling the fuel through the secondary fuel jets. Once it pulls the fuel through, then these will open up and allow the air through. So consequently, if they're already open like this and you stomp your foot into it, it goes twah, and that's all you get. I'll say it again, twah. It was also popping and banging. Oh, well, that might have something to do with it. I thought I cleaned that out of there. Apparently not. I wonder if spider silk is conductive, because that's a surefire way to crossfire if it is. Suffice it to say, I'll get to that later. Ignition points. What happens during the ignition cycle, you have a little cam on the distributor and the little bumps on it open up the contact points. When the points are closed, you are grounding the side of the coil, enabling it to complete the circuit to allow voltage to pass through the primary coil side of the ignition coil. In doing such, it will create a magnetic field. Now, if you know about electricity and coils of wire and magnetic fields, you'll know that if you pass a magnetic field through a coil of wire, you will induce a voltage. The amount of voltage is dependent upon the number of turns in the coil, or the strength of magnetic field is determined by the number of coils in the primary side, how much voltage is being applied, so that determines the strength of your magnetic field. Now on the secondary side, the third thing that determines how much is output from a I gotta back up and do it all over again. So when you close the points, it energizes the primary winding. That creates a magnetic field. When you open the points, the magnetic field collapses. When it collapses faster than what it can build when you close the points. So therefore, when you collapse the magnetic field, it induces a higher voltage, because there's three things that control how much voltage is induced into a coil of wire. That's the strength of the magnetic, or two things. The strength of the magnetic field and the speed at which the magnetic field is passed through the coil. So the faster you pass it through, the higher you raise your voltage. So, when you close the points, there is an amount of time it takes for coil saturation. That's for the magnetic field to build to its full strength. And the reason for dual point distributors is because at high RPM, these points are closed for a very short duration of time. So if you try setting your points to where that duration of time can achieve a high RPM, the points will achieve a higher saturation. Then at high RPM, the points will bounce. And in which case, you're reducing your saturation. So I'm going to roll this over until we get that follower up on the high point of the cam, which you can see in the camera a whole lot easier than I can see with my eyes. I went too far. The cam looks all rusty, so that means I probably wore off that rubbing block in short order, and now the points don't open very far. Oh, just a wee bit more, Captain. I'm gonna say about there. So with a dual point setup, you hook two sets of points in series, which means you can set the points closer together so that they won't bounce at high RPM. You can set the contacts closer together so they don't bounce at high RPM. Let's see, if I turn this screw in, that will draw it closer. If I turn it out, it will push it out. So the old timers of my day, they would say you could use a matchbook cover to get you on the road, and you could. And most specifications are 16 to 17 thousandths if you lack a dwell meter. And I'm going to say those were a wee bit too close. I just stuck them in there at whatever they happened to have been set at. GM went to the uniset points for this configuration. This is not the uniset because it doesn't have the condenser as part of the points. They went to the adjustable points with the little window in the distributor, which was a really good thing, because then you could put a dwell meter on it and you could set the dwell, which is the amount of degrees of crankshaft rotation while the points are closed, to get you sufficient coil saturation. Why, what am I doing? That's what I thought it would do. Let's go back this way. I really can't see this. You know what? I'm gonna crawl underneath the hood. Horribly misaligned. Horribly. We'll try that. We're going for 16 thousandths. We'll get a dwell meter later on and find out where that put us when we set it at 16. I'm trying to keep my hand out of the way and do this. Not working very well. The feeler gauges don't want to cooperate. I got a vacuum line in my way. Oh, my left leg is starting to cramp. I got a big old wide gap in there now. Stick my feeler gauge in there and crank her down. That feels like it. And the other thing, pull the dipstick, a little swipe, smear some on that cam. This is not tune-up procedure. This is make something run that hasn't run in 20 years. Now, it happens to be about 97 degrees right now, but that's still considered a cold start because it is not at operating temperature. Now, I wonder if the choke will close. No. Okay. I'll do it myself. Sounded like it squirted. I've not enough battery. Thankfully, we have our Top Don JS3000 jump starter, which is screaming hot from sitting in the sun, giving us the green light at 75% charged. The Top Don, not the battery. Let's try this again, shall we? That's pretty good. Not quite the way it's supposed to sound, what with that dead cylinder and all. A little bit dead in one cylinder. No smoke. Oh, not like she's loading up. Brought it out here where there's no flammable vegetation except for what's laying across the top of the car. See if we can't get some of the oil to burn off the exhaust manifold on the right side. And then somebody was telling me if it has stuck rings, I've got the 1 gallon gas can. He said put a can of Berryman's B12 in there, and I think that's what I'll do. Yep, I think that's what I'll do. After I shut it off, of course. But before we do that, do this. I didn't like that. That was going down the left side. Try going down the right side. I didn't like that either. Sounds like it's starting to get hot. Yep, we're up to operating temperature. I can't help but think the charging system's working. Got some more RPM out of it. Idle RPM. I don't have enough left. Ruh-roh! I'm out of gas. Yep, that's what it is, Mr. Wizard. I'm out of gas. Bummer. I don't have any more. Well then, it looks like a trip to town for a gallon of gas and some Berryman's. I'm going to show you something. I told you about the air valve, secondary air valves. There's a thing called a secondary vacuum brake. That would be this right here. That when it's running and manifold vacuum is applied, pulls this linkage rod down like that. So when you stomp this thing to the floor, vacuum goes to 0. However, there's residual in the diaphragm there. These can't quite open. So this is what prevents them from opening. So manifold vacuum gets applied to the top, it's trying to pull them open, and this is preventing them from opening until the vacuum drops off, and then they open slowly. When you saw me stomp the throttle, these things snapped right open. They open up, air goes through, fuel does not, engine dies. Would you look here on this thing? She's broke, Captain. I might have one of those. Bet you Mr. Heavy Chevy does. But you gotta pull the screws off of here because that's a whole great big thing here. I've got it. You know, I just gotta, right? It's a lovely 100 degrees now. So Preston tells me if I do this and this, went to the locksmith, had him cut me a key according to the tumbler code. What was I thinking? Oh, got a little bit of a squirt. Close the choke. Gotta wait for the fuel pump to fill the bowl. Wow, listen to that. It's easier to listen to out here when you can't hear all the noise from the carburetor. You still hear that dead cylinder. So Preston tells me we just let it sit there and idle until it runs that entire can of gas through it, and it'll free up every sticky ring in that engine. Now, I am not convinced that that is a stuck ring in number 2. I am convinced that it's probably either a broken piston or they melted a hole through the top of the piston. That's what I'm thinking. I'll gladly take a stuck ring. It wants to pop. Wonder if that's the rubbing block wearing out on the points again. Or whether the Berryman's is actually doing its work in there. Little piece of carbon got caught in the valve for just a split second. I think I'll throw the air cleaner on it. That's exhaust valve. Well, what you hear is coming out the exhaust. What you're hearing is coming out the exhaust. Like I say, I've never done this before. But we're gonna do it. Oh, come on now. There it is. This is a vacuum leak. Who would have thought? No, maybe not. This should be ported vacuum. Nothing there.
Let's see how long a gallon of gas will last.
While we're waiting, safety first. camera overheated and shut down. I don't know where it stopped. Oh. Speaking of stopping. There it is. 30 minutes. It was 4:44 when I opened it. Why? There's a strange hissing sound coming from the car. Might have something to do with the radiator. And the pressure lever being up, and I left it up because it was leaking through the cores. And I didn't want it building up pressure and blowing coolant through the cores. As you can see, it's been coming out the overflow. Well, I guess it's time to romp and stomp. I don't know if I can get the tripod to hold still or not. Pulls hard to the left when braking. That must mean the right front brake is not working. Why am I not surprised? It's idling higher. Still wants to do all that puff stuff. Down into low. Of course, it's a power glide. Wouldn't get out of low until about 17 mile an hour anyway. Hey, the speedo works. Get past the neighbor's place here. She floats! Now, got to try that again. Well, I just can't get it up to 5,000 RPM like I want. The spark knocked a little bit, which means our timing is probably a bit too far ahead. But it does idle higher. Now another thing that is one of my pet peeves. These guys get an engine started up and they just rev the snot out of it. Just right off the bat. Just voila! So that kind of drives me insane. But since I really can't get this thing out on the open road, I could take this down the road and just see what kind of attainable RPM I can get in low. But with only one brake working in the front and unknown what's in the rear, it's probably not a good idea to get this thing over 20 mile an hour. But I'm going to stomp it a time or two just now. Don't have to worry about over revving. Well now, do I continue to try to do more things or just leave it as it is? It seems that we have some restricted CFM, so I could do something like disconnect the muffler at the Y pipe or disconnect the inlet of the muffler. What to do? Well, I'll make a decision and you'll find out in 3, 2, 1. Let's see what the compression is. Coil wire is grounded. Why? Our zero compression cylinder has come up to 90. Well, you know what that means. That means I gotta run a compression test on all the rest of them. I just dropped my spark plug socket. Dead center. Okay, not quite dead center. Let's go for number 2. This one was really good when we did the first compression test. And now I see it's down to 100. Wasn't it at like 170? Well, now we're within 10%. That just don't seem right. I'm going to tie this throttle open. I don't think it makes that much of a difference, but I'm going to do it. You just got to remember to untie the throttle open before you start it up the next time. Surely I can find a spot. Like that. 110. Oh, come on. Oh, I've got it sitting on the release mechanism. 115. I don't have any Marvel Mystery Oil. If you recall the Pontiac 389 Resurrection, I loaded her up with Marvel Mystery Oil. Let it set. You do the same thing with transmission fluid. There used to be a product called K-Site. Hastings K-Site. It's also good for that sort of thing. 121. A person might just drive this engine back to life. Number 1. 124. 3. 128. Number 5. That was 110. Number 7. 123. Approximately. Roundabout. That'll do, pig. You don't want to put new spark plugs in an engine that you're doing something like this to, because it will put deposits all over. And the other thing, I'd never recommend Champion spark plugs in a GM. Not in this vintage anyway. I've done lots and lots. They don't like Champions. They like AC Delcos. But this is what we got. That's what we're going to run. Well, don't it figure? Out of 8 spark plugs, I show you the one that's got the electrode pushed down and something bridging the gap. That'll do, pig. I will have to make a slight retraction of that. The small block Chevys that used the 13/16 plug, the Champion J8 was a very good working plug when you had something that burned a lot of oil, because the Champion J8 is a lawnmower plug, a Briggs and Stratton engine plug that is the highest heat range known to man. So if you wanted to keep from oil fouling the plugs in your oil huffing small block Chevy, you would buy 8 J8 Champions and put them in there. You could extend your overall driving time between plug cleanings. Let's see here. Yeah, it looks about right. I'm going to go over that pre-gapped spark plug thing again. In Fostoria, Ohio, they used to manufacture spark plugs there. Then our vocational school automotive class went on a field trip, and when we asked about pre-gapped spark plugs, he said, well, yes and no, because the outer electrode is welded to the threaded part. The length of that electrode from the center electrode to where it's welded, in order to maintain flat across this way on the outer electrode, the length here has to be a certain distance. Otherwise, when you gap it, you're going to have to bend it down, and then it won't be straight across, and you want it straight across. So they are made for a 35 thousandths gap. That does not mean that they are gapped at 35 thousandths, because the spark plug manufacturers at the time did not set the gaps on any plugs that they manufactured. However, the manufacturing process required the specifications of such that you would always be within 5 thousandths of the required spark plug gap at the end of the manufacturing process, unless of course, you know, they hit on the end and closed them up. Which I haven't seen that in years, but it used to be fairly common when you bought a set of spark plugs that at least one of them would have the electrode smashed down on the end from the packaging and shipping and all the other stuff. Technology is so much better today. And last but most importantly, if you'll recall, I tied the throttle wide open. Not a good thing. Coil wires back on. Spark plug wires are all in. I'm curious to see how it runs on clean spark plugs. Let's have a look. No more dead miss. But now I gotta drive it. Just gotta. Well, it's getting kind of dark, but you know what? I'm thinking maybe, just maybe, this thing is stuck. That means it's closed off the right-hand manifold, and it's forcing the exhaust through the intake crossover and out the other side. And I'm wondering if that might not severely limit the amount of CFM that could be pulled through the right bank. Tomorrow, I'm just gonna have to find that out. First, it was 1. Then it was 2. And then it was 4. And that's how chickens teach each other. So tonight, we're going to engage in a little bit of chicken training. They don't want to go back in the coop. No, they want to sit on the feeder. And then the rest of the chickens going back in the coop going, hey, maybe I'd like to sit on the feeder too. So there's a chicken who just left the coop, made her way back through the fence over to the feeder. I think I'll join you girls, she says. There she is on the far left. Because I think I would like this much better than being in the coop tonight. Wrong. Part of chicken training is when you're closing them up at night, go night night. That's when you're herding them in through this. Oh, nope. Night night. Night night. Night night. There you go. Hey, I think I'd like to go sit on the feeder too. Oh no. Oh no. Yeah, it'll scare the goats. But, you know, they'll be fine. 2 of them saw me come to the barn. They've tried to make their escape into the other pen. I'll show them. Night night. Night night.